For a century, the typical American work week was actually getting shorter. Fathom that. But in today's society, the hustle culture mentality to work, work, work has been ongoing in recent years. However, the pandemic has employees rethinking their relationship to work and valuing their lives outside of their jobs again. Business Insider senior correspondent Aki Ito recently reported on how hustle culture got America addicted to work and breaks down this new mindset of a healthy work-life balance. Welcome, Aki.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about your own personal experience with hustle culture and how your frame of mind pivoted during the pandemic.
Sure. So I actually live here in Sacramento right now. But for a long time, I lived in San Francisco and in really the heart of the tech boom in Silicon Valley. In the 2010s, there was this, intense drive to work that you felt everywhere. Work was the center of life. Nothing else mattered. And this mindset was something that was building and building and building in the white collar professional workforce for a number of decades. But this wasn't always how Americans thought about work.
And can you give us the backstory on America's work versus leisure history?
Sure. So I got really interested in kind of this balance between work and leisure over the course of about 150 years in American history. Starting around the Industrial Revolution, Americans actually used to work a lot more than we do now, more than 60 hours a week. It was brutal.
Wow.
And in those conditions, no one glamorized or glorified work. It was just the thing that you had to do to put food on the table.
Mhm.
Over time, Americans worked hard and they drove economic progress partly to get more leisure time to be able to work less. And that value in leisure persisted for many decades. But there was something that happened around 1980 that made Americans no longer value that kind of leisure anymore.
Right.
So today we actually work just as much as we did back in 1980, which is astonishing when you consider how much our economy has grown since then.
Yeah, and when you say there was a portion where leisure was very much so prioritized, and then it went back to that hard work week, it's just interesting to hear. And you have an interesting fact about Germans and their work week.
That's right. So, today we think of Europeans as people who are very good at, taking vacation. They obviously value their leisure time. But, when you look at the data from up to about 1970, French people and German people actually worked a lot more than Americans did.
Hmm.
There was something that happened around that time in the 70s and the 80s where Americans, their work hour decline completely stopped. But in Europe, that decline continued. And today, Germans work about 10 weeks less than us every year, which is amazing.
Wow, so you're telling me I may need to move or something. But I did want to ask you in regards to the history, why did the decline in work hours start increasing in the 80s?
Sure. So that came to a halt for a number of reasons. You can look at the decline in labor unions in this country, the rise in income inequality, changes in the tax system. But the thing that I really focused on in my story was really this change in culture, the changing ways that Americans were starting to think about their jobs. Like I said before, work used to be just this thing to earn a paycheck, to put food on the table. But increasingly, the way we talked about work turned into, maybe the way we used to talk about God or the way we used to talk about our romantic partners, about
Mhm.
true love. It became this romantic thing, this thing filled with passion, this drive to change the world. And it's because of that Americans were driving themselves to work more and more and more, even if that wasn't healthy for us.
Yeah, I love learning the history about all of this and how it's kind of changed throughout the years. And why would you say that the hustle culture is both a geographical and historical anomaly?
Well, I say it's a historical anomaly because the way that we think about work today, work as the primary source of meaning and purpose in our lives, that's pretty recent. Americans didn't think about work this way even just a few decades ago. I call it a geographical anomaly because, when you go to Europe, this is not the way people talk about work. People, very much value leisure and they put really strict boundaries on the time they work. Work is seen as just this thing you have to do to, survive, to, live comfortably. And so the way we think about work today in America is very, very strange.
And how has the pandemic pivoted the way Americans think about their relationship with work now?
I think, the pandemic gave people a lot of time to think. And it gave everyone this pause in their lives that made them rethink their relationship to work. It made them realize that they were working too much before, that they want to live differently. And I think that's what we are seeing now. All this talk about the Great Resignation.
Right.
That's the result of this big rethink that Americans have had over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think definitely creating those boundaries outside of work. You're not focusing on work as much and always keeping that hustle culture mentality. Creating those barriers is a must. Aki, it was a pleasure having you on today, and you can read Aki's report on hustle culture at businessinsider.com.